Welcome to the inaugural episode of Let's Start a Dialogue. My name is Marcin Knara, and as your host, I look forward to having conversations that facilitate curiosity, learning, and the ability to speak freely with a variety of exceptional individuals. In today's episode, my friend Joseph Donovan and I will be speaking with University of Massachusetts Amherst Professor David Sela. Professor Sela currently teaches and conducts research at UMass Amherst. And throughout this episode, we cover interesting topics such as the microbiomes in our bodies, breast milk, how human desires affect how we act in a technologically modern world, the different cultural perspectives around food, and more. I hope you enjoy this podcast as much as I enjoyed making it. Now, let's start a dialogue with Professor David Sela. Dr. Sela, thank you so much for having this conversation with us. It's a pleasure to kind of be able to talk to you on the side and not in a classroom setting. Thank you so much. One of the things we first want to kind of get to know about you is your background and kind of what got you into food science, because I mean, as STEM majors, this is kind of like a whole new perspective on academia and kind of where your experience lies. So that'd be very interesting to kind of know where you kind of started off with, what got you into food science and whatnot.
Right. Well, first, thanks, Marcin and Joey, for inviting me to chat with you guys. I really appreciate the opportunity here to talk about what we do in food science in particular, I guess. That's the first question you asked. How did I get into food science? Kind of a backwards sort of way, and I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. I was a molecular biology undergraduate, and I wanted to do something. I want to do something with my hands, make something that I can see. And so molecular biology is really cool. It's really fundamental, and we get to learn about these biological processes. That's great. But at the time, I was really into wine. So I was really into wine, all kinds of wine culture. I was in college. At the time, she was my girlfriend, but now she is my wife. We were into exploring the world of wine. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to go make wine or study wine or do something scientific with wine. I didn't really know. So I went to place called University of California, Davis to study wine microbiology. And so I learned what food science was there. As it turns out, wine is a better, I don't know, I was about to say a habit, but that's probably not a great way of putting it. Wine is a better passion or hobby than it is a study system, for me at least. There's really smart people studying wine and wine microbiology. And so I transitioned to other aspects. But the funny thing is, you asked about how did you get into food science? It's goes into a label of what are you? You as a student are a given major, or are you more than that? And I would say you're more than that. You're more than a comp sci major. You're more than a poli sci major. You're an amalgamation of all these different aspects of you. And so for me, I was actually trained as a microbiologist, and we study nutrition science, and we work with evolutionary biology, and we work on breast milk, and we work on plant-based nutrition, and we work on cannabinoid research, and we work on all these different things that fit into this profile of whatever this laboratory, whatever this professor is. So we're not just one aspect, right? And I know from a college experience, when I was in college, I was I am this major. I strongly identify with this. But for me, good people do good things over the course of their career, and I don't want to be penned into a certain type of scientist or professor or something, but I end up here in the Department of Food Science at University of Massachusetts, and I'm proud to be here, and we're just doing our thing.
Well, that's great. So you mentioned your research a little bit, and we know just from class and what you talk about, you research a lot of breast milk, but also the human diet and kind of how it affects human microbiomes. We're interested in the latter. So can you go a little into the research of that, the human microbiomes and how food and diet kind of affects that?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for it. This is one of my favorite questions. I mean, partially because I've been spending so much time thinking about this and working on this too. And for those folks who are tuning in here and watching this for the first time or hear about the microbiome for the first time, is that we are colonized by all these microbial life forms that we can't see, that we can't actually separate ourselves from. So what part is human and what part is microbe if I can't actually take the microbe apart? And so for me, it's fascinating that the whole concept of what is a human or what is is, to get philosophical, is challenged by this idea that we have more microbial cells in us and on us than we actually have our own human cells, right? I'm very focused on nutrition. I really appreciate human performance and how we can move the dial on having people, I don't know, if you play basketball, jump higher, sleep better, get more quality sleep. How can we impact human physiology? And so the target for us is the microbes, because they're enmeshed like physiologically with us. So what we eat not only feeds us, but feeds them as well. So let's learn as much as we can about them, the microbes. We can't separate them from us, so that I know how to feed us, human aspect, the host, as well as I know how to feed them as well. So we study babies, and we study breast milk in babies because that is like the only food that has evolved for the benefit of our species. So think about like asparagus or meat. Those things are eaten by people, but only breast milk has evolved specifically to nourish people. And so that's why we study it, so we can like learn these fundamental truths about human nutrition. And it's not that I'm looking to feed YouTube breast milk or food breast milk like at the campus center or anything like that. It's just I want to know everything there is about nutrition. And so let's start with the fundamental principles, right? First principles, and let's take away everything that we thought we knew and like let's build it back up. And that's what we're doing in our laboratory.
Okay. That's a good perspective to have on breast milk. It's something like I know I myself have never thought of. Like, I mean, you know, it's the only thing, like you said, that has evolved with humans to provide us, you know, from infancy into, you know, as we mature. And that's incredible. Wow.
And it's one of like the first things you probably like drink, I guess, or have for like food. So it seems like it would be a very important like part of how we just grow to like be like a big like adult or a human or whatever. What would you say is like the most fascinating thing that like you learned about breast milk, just overall, like from all of your research in it?
Right. So there's a whole bunch, and this is, if I could just choose one, it's this. So in breast milk, we have these funky sugars in it, and you might be familiar with cow milk with lactose, right? So lactose intolerant people can't digest it really well. But you happen to be part of that tribe. All right. Well, there's things you can do about that, including avoiding dairy. Anyway, so in breast milk, we have beyond lactose, we have these sugars that can't be digested by the baby, but it doesn't harm them. Instead, it feeds the beneficial microbes, the good guys in the gut microbiome. And I spent maybe 15 years studying this aspect and learning all the different intricacies without diving into the nitty gritty, which is not important. The bottom line is that mom is literally dissolving her own tissues for the benefit of the infant in making these sugars inside her breast milk to feed the microbiome and not necessarily the baby. So it's like this really bizarre, from one perspective, system that you're not born understanding. It's something that we learned in science. And so to me, that's really interesting. And it's one, if you take a look at our lives, right? We're born, right? And then one day something else happens and we're not here anymore, right? But what we do between birth and death is choice. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm using my choice to be able to understand what's going on in the system and how mom is feeding the microbiome in addition to the baby, which is just bizarre. My 18-year-old version of myself right now is going like, this is wild. I'm talking into my computer to you guys in some, I don't know where you're at. It looks maybe a basement or an apartment. We're talking about breast milk and microbiome and like, here we go. This is great.
So you said you studied more than nutrition and food science, obviously, and like evolutionary biology, microbiology. So with regards to like the human microbiome, something that we were discussing ourselves when we were kind of thinking about things that we wanted to ask you that genuinely interests us, obviously, was like, the way humans evolved. I mean, centuries ago, I guess the question I'm going to pose is, how do you think our like ancient wants and desires that kind of were evolved with us and helped us kind of survive as primates, kind of are affected now with the food we eat and the diets we have. Day to day, we want, we're hungry, we eat food, we want this, we crave this. And in our desires, evolutionarily almost like drive us to do certain things. And then I'm curious to see if you have any take on that, in the way of like, how does diet affect, like the way we think and the way our body, like, drives us in certain directions, whether mentally or physically.
That's a great question, and it dovetails with some of the things we're talking about this semester. And so you're right, evolutionarily speaking, we have evolved to be fearful of certain things and gravitate towards others, which is the basis towards a purely hedonistic lifestyle. I want that, that makes me feel good. I don't want that, that makes me not feel good, right? I want to keep on living, I don't want to die, right? So evolutionarily speaking, that's really been allowing us to reach this moment. But the question you're asking is really interesting, that what happens when we have everything that we need? We have this landscape, and for many of us, not all of us, and that's one of the biggest jobs we have, to make sure everyone has access to abundance. But what happens in this world? We have abundance of choice. Like, if I have a meal plan, or I'm able to buy whatever I want, how does that dictate my health outcomes based on this organism that has evolved when abundance was not readily available, when a bad choice could be made that can cost me my life at this point in time, like choosing, like, do I want Vietnamese food downtown Amherst, or do I want Thai food, right? Like, that's not going to kill me. That just is a choice too. And you're 100% right. We are right now dealing with challenges of modernity, where we have this overabundance of calories, we have an overabundance of choices, and we might be more likely to go imbalanced because we have evolved to like seek out food when it's scarce. And so when it's scarce, I want to eat more, right? And that feels good. And so food becomes this thing where we can seek it out as more of a comfort also. And so, like, I don't feel well, let me feel better. And so, like, that's something where we have access to food at any point in time. And I say this in class, I just picked this up, maybe I've done it once, and say, like, I can get food anytime I want. I just press a couple of buttons there and it just comes in here. But our bodies are not used to having that constant access. And so it's not a punishment for us to like maintain mindful eating patterns and working out and working on other aspects of our living. It's just the way that we are. That's just the human condition too. So it gets a little confusing for the human organism if I can take a step back and refer to us as a third entity.
Do you think, like, as we have evolved to like you said, like order food with like a click of a button on your phone, like from having to like go out and like hunt for your food, do you think like there's been like a major like prominent like shift in how we like view food from that like transition of like being able to just so like easily access food versus having to like wait super long to like farm it and like harvest it, or like go out gather like your food, or like go and like hunt animals? Like, do you think there's been a certain like prominent shift in the evolution of humans that have like just like noticeably they've gone from appreciating food more to just like viewing it as just like a like something that you just get and you put in your stomach and it makes you like keep going?
Yeah, there's a bunch of interesting questions in there, and I think you're onto something. I think that the easily accessible food that we have right now in our daily lives makes us, think of it. Actually, we don't think about it as much, right? But that's not everybody. We happen to be in the ecosystem of the university. Most of us happen to be food secure. There's some people who are food insecure who don't have as much access, right? And there's also people who are returning to like, where does my food come from? People are interested in sustainability and interested in having a connection with their food. But you're right. I do really believe, and this is only a recent innovation, not only the phone is recent, but also just having supermarkets with stuff to get, restaurants with stuff to get. This is only a few decades, right? And this is a blip in the entire evolution of mammals and humans in particular, too. So we notice these big shifts in our lifespan, because if we live to be like 80 years old, 100 years old, whatever it is, it seems like, oh, this is a major thing, but it's just an adjustment. And so like we will return And I do believe people are returning to wanting to have a relationship with their food, because what else are we going to be doing with this time we have in our existence, right? Like, let's be mindful of this interaction we have with each other, with our foods. What are we doing on a day-to-day basis with our technology, whatever it may be? I happen to think that our our radical interconnectedness through our technology is amazing. That is just, we will not go backwards on that one. People may have problems with social media, but that's just a really small little detail. And like, social media hasn't been around for very, very long. And the same thing with this abundance of food. Who wants to go backwards and not have an abundance of food? The challenge is to make sure everyone has an abundance of food. But Joey, you're 100% right. Having this recent innovation, technologically driven, maybe policy driven as well, and other aspects too, has really, in many instances, been confusing for the human organism too. But the overwhelming opportunities, oh my God, the sky's the limit. I'm a big optimist when it comes to all of this stuff too. I know we're in the middle of a pandemic right now, and a lot of our brothers and sisters are challenged by things that are non-pandemic related. But we're on a good track here, folks. That's my strong opinion. And I may have all the privileges of an individual who can say something like that, and that's something I acknowledge. But that's just the way it is for my perspective. Anyway.
Yeah, you can always point out the bad stuff, but I think it has, like, the fact that you can get food to people easier is overall like a good thing too. And I also think you brought up just like being kind of closer, like having like a closer relationship with food. I was wondering what your take on like having like local foods around us. Like, we're in Amherst right now, so it's kind of like, I feel like more of that like society where there's like local food. Like, we have a farm just like behind our house, and you can like go and like get food from them or whatever. Like, what is your kind of like outlook for the future on like local foods being like a thing, like people like growing like stuff like around them, and like instead of getting it from like factory farms and stuff, like getting their food like locally?
Well, given the format of this, I don't know if it's appropriate to toss a question back to you two, but it's for me, I'm curious, what is your opinion about that? Do you seek out local foods? Is that something that you see a value in?
Currently, I feel like I know, Joey over here, big Trader Joe's guy, big organic.
A little bit.
And I myself,
switched back to Big Y.
I think just the way we surround ourselves with people currently, it's very food conscious, healthy. We don't really snack particularly, although we do go out on weekends and enjoy our time. But I think for the most part, at least what we're seeing from like a college student perspective and the people that we're exposed to, it seems like a lot of people are currently going back to, like you said, like, where's my food coming from? Like, where can I get the best food, or the most organic or the healthiest? Who am I helping by getting this food? I know UMass has their program. I can't recall what it's called, where you pay for a semester of locally grown food, and it's like, that's like a great initiative to kind of become a part of if people are interested in those things. But for the future, it's difficult to tell if this is almost like a trendy thing where people are just in it right now, and it's cool to get organic food and kind of show off that you're into this, because in the end, I feel like most people are still going to get their foods from grocery stores and supermarkets in the future. And is this something that's like scale, like local food, how easy is it going to be with technology and just the future to like scale it to a point where it makes more sense to get local food and not processed foods and not manufactured foods, and it's hard to say. Kind of, I think it's going to be a big policy issue where if people aren't pushing for these things, then it's just going to phase out and people are going to go right back to what they were doing before. What do you think about it?
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing your perspective. And I want to call out a couple things you said that I share your point of view. And when I first moved to California, I was really introduced to local organic food scene. I was like, wow, this is fantastic. I didn't know anything about this. This was in graduate school. And so it became like a cultural imperative, right? So like my people were really into it. Like, you mentioned Joey's really into Trader Joe's. So like the people I was hanging out with were really into Trader Joe's too. And we were going to farmers markets and that kind of thing. So it became a cultural, social aspect of it. In addition to that, we also like food too. So we like to have dinner parties, go to restaurants and celebrations and all the things around food. So we just happen to, as humans and me individually, like the whole idea of food. Now, asking about the food trend, about local, sustainable, organic, whether or not that's a transient position, only time will tell. I happen to feel that it's not, but who am I to be able to predict the future? I just think that the direction of that we're heading is for having increased access to that. And you can talk about sustainability issues, you can talk about food justice issues, but local food happens to taste better because it's a little closer, it's grown a little closer, and it's something to do, right? Going to the farmer's market or going to a CSA or going hang out with your friends and talk about like what kind of food. It's just like instead of just sitting around and just like what you want to do, like let's make food, let's grow food, let's find the dude who's making the food or whomever's making the food. So I think that people want to have more in touch with this greater thing that we're in right now. And for me personally, and this might be just from like where I'm at in my life, and I'm a UMass Amherst professor, I want to know where my food comes from. I want to be in touch with that too. It's a little bit more sterile to be like have it from like just like a unit, a package. Not that I don't have packaged food or anything like that. But anyway, I think I'm addressing the big picture, the highlights of the question you asked.
Yeah, definitely. I can agree to. I mean, just last weekend I was kind of aimlessly driving around Amherst, and just nearby, I guess, towns, and stumbled upon a nice little Polish farm. And I myself am Polish, so I saw a sign and I was like, all right, I'm stopping here. I saw a bunch of pumpkins and I was like, all right, I'm gonna get the house some pumpkins. And I it was nice to kind of have like human interactions with people, and just like everyone was so friendly, it was good to like chat to the people that are growing the food that I'm about to buy and eat, and kind of share, our Polish, our heritage and a little bit of the culture, and being able to see like some Polish foods kind of in the refrigerators that were showcased, and yeah, I immediately leaving that little not farm stand, a little store. I texted my family and I was like, hey, like just stop to a farmer's market. Everyone was Polish, it was exciting, and it was nice to kind of like know that that's around here. These little family owned places, and yeah, you're definitely right. Definitely right, and definitely agree that it's you know more and more it seems like people are looking for those experiences around food, and being able to talk about it in this way. And it's yeah, it's very exciting to kind of see the way it's going right now, even though we're in a constantly changing like technological landscape. It's nice to know that there's a fallback to kind of the roots, and kind of what's important, and mainly what we need versus the excess of what we're kind of just choosing to get into, which is definitely exciting. But I kind of want to shift this to, I think you mentioned this earlier, regarding what people are afraid of eating, and what people are if this is good for me, I'm going to eat it. If this is bad for me, I'm going to stay away from it. Um, what's your take on like fears of certain foods, like fats and like sugars and processed foods? Like, obviously everything in moderation, is, it's not going to kill you unless it's McDonald's or something. But what's your take on kind of, again, it seems like a trend of, every few years, one food turns bad and another food turns good, and kind of how that affects, what people think about food.
Right. Thank you for asking these questions. A topic I'm passionate about. it reveals an underlying thought, especially in our Western minds, about dualistic thinking, about good versus bad. And if that happens not to be good, it's bad, and throwing labels onto people, thoughts, and foods as well. And so the idea of foods as symbols. And so that's why over several decades, you can have a shift of fat bad, carb bad, right? And so the big joke is, when are proteins going to be bad, right? So like looking at macros and labeling them as good versus bad, given whatever sort of zeitgeist is, like the spirit of the time and how people communicate. And now with social media has been around now for a while, but we get instantaneous judgment over certain things as well. Food is food. It's a collection of chemical molecular properties that your body doesn't know. It just, you put your food in it and your body digests it. You're right, it's about a balance, and there's no such thing as a bad food. There is an imbalance where I can eat like a birthday cake every single morning for like 2 straight weeks. That's probably not going to help me achieve my goals. Whatever my goals may be, that's not a great idea for what this guy's trying to do, you know? But at the end of the day, that's a choice that could be made. We have to be aware, or we could be aware, we don't have to do anything, of the way our mind and our thoughts and our mental models work, and the way we label things as good versus bad, and the aversions and the going towards things. And we start thinking in absolute terms, and it becomes difficult, like, oh, I should not have that. Well, why shouldn't you have that? Why shouldn't you have that hamburger bun with your hamburger? Oh, that's going to, I don't know, that's too many carbs for this day. Now, if you happen to be a performance athlete, or maybe you're being a bodybuilder and you have specific goals in mind, I get that. But for the 99.9% of us, that gets very challenging thinking, and we tend to overthink. And so it's very easy to slip into disordered thinking about foods. And so labeling things good versus bad. And I talk about this in class about orthorexia, about labeling things good versus bad. And I know a few people, not necessarily in the campus community, but my daily life, who will just go through extremes, be like, oh no, I can't eat that. I'm just not going to eat that. And even myself, my own thought processes, I do have this, and I watch my own thoughts about like, I shouldn't have that. And I ask myself, I try, why shouldn't I have that? What is wrong with that too? So even when you were talking, and you're not trying to knock down McDonald's, right? McDonald's is not I haven't been to McDonald's for a really long time, but that's sort of like a cultural perspective, at least in our peer group. Like, let's stay away from that because, I don't know, whatever kind of health performance goals that we may have too. But that's a long-winded way of talking about, we really need to like pull back, instead of labeling things as good versus bad, foods, thoughts, people as well. We really can be thinking about in terms of the entire holistic package. And I know that sounds really complicated, but how well is your sleep? How well are your interactions with people? How satisfied you are with your life and your role, your mission? Are you eating balance? Are you exercising? All these things plays out. So I can't like take out like one aspect as your food, and that's going to like do it for you, or it's going to kill you. You got to you're a complete organism. And not only you're a complete organism, you also have your microbes, and you also have when you're sharing a house with an individual, you share microbes. You share food, you share microbes. In your community, you share ideas, you share microbes. You can't separate any of this stuff, which doesn't make it like, oh no, let me throw up my hands and say this is meaningless and like this is awful. It might be a little bit more of like, this is less meaning than we thought it was, with a smiley face on it. Mm-hmm. Maybe we shouldn't take it so seriously. Maybe we shouldn't take anything so seriously, right? Just think about that. When we start thinking about absolutes, we start thinking very, very seriously about stuff. If you do this, then this will happen. If I eat this, then this will happen. No, it won't. Most likely it's not. I mean, I'm not going to eat a whole birthday cake for breakfast, but the world's not going to end if I did. I mean, I would not be happy with it, but just based on my psychology, just be like, why did you do that? To prove a point? Yeah. So anyway, that's my perspective. And registered dietitians and people who study nutrition, who are really focused towards mindfulness-based practices, will be in the same constellation of thoughts.
Like, that kind of sprung up some thoughts, and I'll try to recollect them. But I think, like, what I was thinking about that is, like, being absolute about this and that, saying like this is good and this is bad. It's kind of like, it's hard to say that because like everyone is different in their own way, and like you're kind of, everyone has their own goals, everyone has their own like conditions, like whether it be like health conditions or whatever, that like it really varies what's good for like the person and stuff. And and I guess like all like the fancy like diets and stuff and all that, like that people say like this is good, like the keto diet, like paleo, whatever, like I was kind of curious like what, like I guess it must work for some people because people obviously like it's popular for some reason, but like my dad was telling me the other day, he was talking to his doctor and he was like, what should I do like with my diet at like this age or whatever? He's like, well, what it comes down to pretty much is like you have calories that you take in and then calories that you burn like throughout like your lifestyle, whatever you do. And if you balance that out in a way that like makes you feel good and makes like your lifestyle good, then that's like all you can kind of ask for. Like, do you think that's like a valid way to kind of like go about your nutrition? And like obviously like you were saying like eating like a birthday cake, like that's calories in, but what if you like run like super far that day and you burn all those calories and then you're feeling good? Like is that is that kind of like a valid way, or
I love to see you
too
eat a
simple?
birthday cake and go for a half marathon.
It must provide you some energy though.
It would provide you some energy. I think the biggest value and the reason why we see a lot of success, or maybe temporary success with diets, there's maybe not habit formation that allows you to like take that for several years. You know, a lot of times people have these diets and then they stick with it and they get results. And usually the results are a number on a scale or some sort of body image benefit that they get from themselves or from their community, right? Those are, to be direct, that's what a lot we do in our Western culture is surrounded by that, what we measure success by. But we'll put that to the side for now. The diets like keto and any sort of diet is successful because it's actually mindfulness based. You know what's put into your face. You know what you're eating. You have this strict regimen and you know what you're eating versus I'm eating at will and I'm not quite aware of what I'm doing. And there's a big difference. So if you can eat intuitively and you can eat mindfully, you can pretty much eat whatever you want, knowing that we have different requirements. And you said very well, Joey, that some of us have different conditions we don't know about. And so like that's of course a thing too. And we have different genetics and different lots of things too. So not every single body responds the same way. But the underlying goal here is to be aware of what you are eating too. And so if I'm going out with my colleagues, I'm probably not going to like the fanciest restaurant because I'm going to be talking about work stuff. And if I'm talking about work stuff, I may not be paying attention to my food. And so would I really want to buy like a $30 entree when I'm not really paying attention to it? No. So, but like in my daily life, I try to eat mindfully and know exactly where my food comes from, how I enjoy it, and try to understand exactly when I'm full. And so for me, that's been a very helpful way. It's not like I'm on a diet of any sort. It's just I'm more aware, or I am aware of what I put into my mouth. The calories in versus calories out, that could be a helpful framework. But again, you're not taking into account that people have different metabolic rates and we have different aspects to our lives that make us hold on to calories more in adipose tissues. So if you happen to be more stressed and your sleep is not works as well, you may hold on to those calories more because your body shifts these programs to say, you know what, things aren't good. Let's save some of this stuff for later when because right now we don't know when things are going to get restored. So anyway, I appreciate you sharing that reflection, and I think it was your dad you said was.
Yeah, he was like my doctor's like the most simple man in the world. Like he's been he's clearly, I guess, but he was like, yeah, you had a good point, and my dad's been living by that. He's a pretty healthy guy, so
right on.
Thought I'd bring it up, but yeah, it does seem like I feel like people are far too complicated to kind of like just either take the stance of like saying this is bad for your body or this is good, or just saying like just eat this and like do exercise and then you'll be good. Like it's just, I don't know. It seems very like you're putting a very simple like description on like a complicated like body that's like doing all this work to process that food and stuff.
Well, that's a really good point. I mean, like I'm an academic, I'm a scientist, I love what I do, but our business is to make things overly complicated. As soon as we ask questions and get answers, it leads to more questions, more answers, and we break it down even further and we make things more complicated than they may need to be. And so we live in this world of complicated rules and definitions and explanations, and that leads to what we think are absolutes. Like I learned this, I spent 15 years learning this, so that means this must be. And it becomes part of our self-identity, our ego, and we start becoming very strong advocates. This must be what life is. And actually life and existence is much more plastic than that. And so when I say, let's not take everything so seriously, it's because we made things so serious about like almost every single thing. If you do this, you're not going to be this. And that's not really the way it works out. At least that's not been my perspective. I've been fortunate to have that experience.
Yeah, I remember in food science, they were or I think you and Galaxy were talking about just like the brown rice and versus white rice analogy, and it's like, don't like freak yourself out and like make you like get your mind running about like the difference between that, because it's like you can make that a simple thing if you want, and like if you enjoy like white rice, then you can have that, but like if you don't, then have brown rice, but don't get yourself worked up over like the decision, because you don't have to overcomplicate it. It's just like,
yeah,
do something else that that'll like if that's your like vice or whatever, like, and like do something else that maybe will like make that better or something. I don't know.
No way, man. Like I don't want that to be my vice. I want to focus on more fun vices than that. That is
I know. Right after I said it, I was like, white rice versus brown rice is not really
yeah, that's no, like to each their own. If like that's like if someone's gonna get dangerous, then go for it. That's for me, we're living in a time where we can get sushi in so many places, and we're thinking about ways we can be upset about it. We're thinking about, I should be getting this brown rice right now. Why did I get this white rice? Those thoughts do pop up, and we can't, those are judgments. And the key is not to judge those judgments. Like, why am I thinking about this? I should not, just go with it, observe it, and just allow it to pass, because they will pass over time. And so to get comfortable, to be content, to let all this stuff go is one of the aspects of our shared humanity for us to move on, because we got some good stuff going on right now and in the future. I got some good stuff planned. I'm sure you two have some good stuff planned. Let's get to this, right? Instead of standing in our own way, going like, we got sushi everywhere. This is so amazing. Let's spend like 3 seconds of our brain space to think about brown rice versus white rice, which is not a critique of someone who does that, because as you said in class, Galaxy and I do that. That's an actual legit example that we have experienced before in our past. And maybe in the future, who knows? We don't know where thoughts come from. They come from somewhere, and they're there. But the point is not to judge them.
Yeah, good point.
Spoken like somebody that meditates or is very mindful.
I yes.
Yeah. Something I wanted to discuss is like not necessarily traveling related, but like culturally speaking, like West versus the East and the Asias, and the way we kind of treat kind of a lot of things, including food. Have you ever traveled to Asia per se, or anywhere out there? Okay, so what was your experience like in terms of the way like people interacted with food or thought about food? I know like we've briefly talked about this in class, for example, like Vietnamese food and just kind of, and how like soup, for example, is made more delicately and traditionally than things that we see like around here in the United States. But how do like basically just the differences in culture and how people treat food and act around food and how it affects them?
So let me kick it back to you two. Have you been to Asia just yet?
Nope.
No,
Is it on your list?
Yes.
absolutely.
If you can name what is your first target.
Thailand for me, or
I'd say Japan for me.
I was gonna say Japan. I really want to go to Tokyo, but yeah, definitely Thailand for first pick.
I've never been to Thailand. I've been in Tokyo. Thailand is intriguing me for the food and the beaches, and I'm gonna write that down right now. So post COVID, that's gonna be my first place to go to. And Tokyo is wild. It is what you think it would be in your expectations. And so when we talk about like Asian food and people's relationship to food, it varies, of course, by country. And I know that you know that, and it varies by region. What's interesting to me is to see what the influence is of the West in Asia and vice versa. Also, so I've been to China, and I've only been to China once. I was in a place called Hangzhou, and Hangzhou is maybe 2 hours away from Shanghai. And most of China, maybe all of China, they're really into food. They're really into celebration and really into big banquet meals. But there's so much regional variation. And when I was in Hangzhou, they had these really big lazy Susans, like those like wheels in the middle of the table, like a round table. And oh my God, I can't believe like how many dishes came out of this one kitchen. Um, and it was just wild. I can't describe it. Words just don't work in being able to talk about it. Like people love food, but I can't put a specific Asian label on that sort of particular experience. Aside from like me coming from my own Western perspective, going to this place that's exotic to me, right? I've never been to China before. Like, what's this going to be like? That was really welcoming to me. And so that's sort of like an international currency of like welcome. It was a restaurant, it was my peers, so that was amazing, right? Like I'm so grateful for having that experience. Tokyo, major international metropolitan city, huge. The scale is unbelievable. It's got this like modern techie thing going on. It's also got that trippy, wild, like anime, like what's going on here thing going on. It's got this traditional artsy, artistic Zen tea garden thing going on, and it's all in one location all over the city. It is amazing. I feel I've been there twice. I was there once for like 2 days and another time for like 4 days, so not very long. But I feel like you can. I want to go there for like a month and just like be there. I actually want to live there. Why not? And it was a completely different vibe than in China. And the way that people in Japan view their food, there's an ideal, and I don't want to make a generalization for all Japanese, but there is an ideal of like pushing away from the table when you're 80% full. There's an actual word, and I'm not going to try to say it because I don't really remember it right now, but there's an actual Japanese term about like pushing away from the table when you're 80% full. And I think that that was really, really interesting for me to learn at one point in time because a lot of times in our experience, I don't know how it was growing up in your households, that like if you go back for seconds, like then mom knows that, or dad, whomever made food, knows that that was a good dish, or like at your Thanksgiving, go back for seconds. Of course, this is great. But other cultures are like, let's have the food will be there tomorrow. Also, you don't have to like stuff your face. So I thought it was really interesting to learn.
That's awesome. And do you think it has something to do with also, I mean, something that I know we've spoken as a house here has just come up, is that a lot of the reasons that people overeat is because, I mean, you're supposed to eat slower. You don't really know when you're full until like afterwards. Do you think that is that something that, might have like influenced the whole like, leave the table when you're 80% full, probably because you're actually more full than you think, something like that?
Yes, 100%. I do. Physiologically, we respond to it. What's known as satiety, that signal, lags behind our actual appetite. And so there's a fundamental tension between those. And if you focus on each bite, if you can, it's not easy to do that. And then you put your fork down between bites and you're just enjoying the food as it comes. Eventually you'll be like, oh, I'm full. and it comes versus like shoveling food into your face. And by the way, I could be a food shoveler myself. I'm a fancy professor in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, but you get me going around wings on a certain time of year, then I'm not going to be thinking about, ooh, I'm going to have one bite here, one bite here, one bite here. It's just the way it happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but that's a really good observation.
Yeah, is that custom like kind of like backing away when you're not quite full yet? Is that like viewed as that's not viewed as like, oh, the food wasn't that good? Is that kind of like a respectful like thing too? Just like how is that? What is like the meaning behind that, I guess, and like yeah.
Joey, that's a really good question. And I don't know where that arises from. What I suspect is the case is that the Japanese culture, and this is again a generalization, and I'm not an expert in Japanese culture, but there are some cultural expectations in that culture about doing things the right way. And actually, there's some hypotheses, or some people think the reason why Zen Buddhism is so popular in Japan is because that culture happens to be really focused on doing things a right way, and it leads to great anxiety when things don't go as planned. So Zen teaches you to let go of those expectations too. And I think that pushing away from the table at 80% full is just consistent with doing things the right way. I don't know the origin behind that. That's a really good question. It might be one of those things that's unanswerable, right? Like we don't know the origin behind like all these things. I mean, we talk about in class, like we don't really know who is the first person to name it the BLT, which might seem like a pretty simple thing, but like if you think about that, just who is the first person to look at artichokes and be like, that looks good?
Yeah.
Or like independently, like a bunch of people, right? Like I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
That's cool. And that reminded me of like the sushi kind of that like video on it too, and like how like particular they are with their like the way that they prepare all of their food and all of that. And it seems like that is kind of like that is like what they take from their whole culture of like being very like respectful of how they prepare their food and like how like much time they put into it and stuff to make it like how it should be and like how the customer like wants it and whatever. So seems like it's a very like kind of consistent with like their customs and stuff. But I also have no clue what like Japanese culture is like besides like the small stuff I learned from food science. But
well, it maybe if I would encourage you to get to Tokyo whenever you get a chance. I told this story very briefly in 102, but I'd like to reshare it for your 60,000 subscribers that you're sure to get to. That I was wandering around the streets of Tokyo, lucky me, about to go to a scientific conference, looking for something to get in trouble with. And I found this really amazing department store in the Ginza district, really fancy stuff, expensive, everything. And I found a bar, like a 6-seat bar, all the way at the top. Like, you know what's a good idea? This is a good idea. So I sat my butt down in that bar, and I met the bartender, Yukino, really kind individual, knew exactly what I needed. And she's like, well, you want to have a flight of green tea based cocktails? Exactly. That's exactly what I want right now in this moment. And so she made me a flight of green tea based cocktails. What was striking to me was when she made one particular drink, and I forget what it was. It might have been an old fashioned or regardless, doesn't matter. She had matcha green tea powder in a vessel, and it had this traditional cherry blossom artistry around this vessel. And she lifted the lid, and I don't know if you can see this in the camera, and she put it down effortlessly. And she scooped it just like almost like a ballerina. She scooped it out and she put it into the tumbler, the shaker, and she did it like just flowing like in nature. And then she took the top of that vessel, put it back on perfectly without looking. At least in my memory, she wasn't looking, but she did things the right way. And it was very clear the right way was a certain point of view. And it was a way that like a typical college bar is nothing like that, right? Like that's just not going to happen at Stackers, and like
Right.
that's not a thing.
Yeah.
But like even in the American bar, like New York City, if you're going to go get fancy cocktails, it's not going to have that much attention to aesthetics and detail. And I get it. I get that like if everyone's worried about aesthetics and detail all the time, then people are freaking out about, doing the right thing. Anyway,
Although I feel like, I mean, here it's less, I mean, like you described that bartender like flowing and like meticulous and calculated. I feel like here it's a lot of like it's quick to get it done, drinks or food and things like that. But also like some sort of it's like a different showmanship almost. I feel like if you go to an expensive bar or somewhere, they're really trying to like put on a whole show. It's just, I mean, it's just different. It's more upbeat and exciting. But I think it's just us being where we are, or depending, if you're in a big city, it's kind of what you're gonna get. That's what it seems like. But yeah,
Rather than worrying about, I feel like that like act of like performing the making the drink, like I guess it's like what you kind of like prioritize versus like doing that, um, versus like, oh, pour the drink and then here you go and then get out of here. Like it's like, I don't know. That's kind of like what I was thinking about that too. It's like, it's whatever you value more, like, and if you value that like art of making this like a certain way, then and that like that is like the important thing, then that's good. But otherwise,
changes,
like
yeah.
if it's fine if you just like McDonald's, the person that's making the food is probably slapping that thing together and putting it in a bag, like, and that's just like, I guess that's cool in itself too.
well, there's a time and place for stuff, and I enjoy myself when I find myself in a bar that's you're three deep and you're fighting to get a drink. Not all the time, mind you. That's not like what I want to happen all the time. But there's a time and place for everything, right? Like at a tailgate, it's not going to be Yukino with like the fancy matcha tea, right? You don't want that at a tailgate. It's going to be a different experience. And for me, I want all the experiences, right? And there might be just some experiences I happen to gravitate towards more. But I can't go to the top of this department store in the Ginza district in Tokyo every single day. I'm more likely to go to a tailgate than that.
Yeah,
That's awesome. So something we were curious about earlier, and it's kind of like switching the topics a little bit. Was, I mean, as students, we're balancing, and this is something Joe, you brought up prior to this call, was we're balancing, our classes, especially with COVID now, it's a little different, it's a little weird. Personally, I mean, it's not that bad, but I mean, it is a pandemic. So we were curious, like, what does your workload look like with COVID? And like, as a professor, like from your perspective, like, was your workload increased? I mean, is it, more difficult balancing all these classes and research and all these other things?
Right. I think the best way of putting it is it's different. And for me, it happened so all of a sudden last semester that it was such a shock then. I was like, man, what's going to happen in the fall? Like, what's going to go on? And I was not, I wouldn't say dreading it. I was just like, what is going to be class like? Because I really do enjoy teaching. I'm primarily a scientist. We do a lot of research in our laboratory, but I'm a professor as well. Or my primary goal from the University of Massachusetts standpoint is my professor role, right? And I enjoy my teaching mission a lot. But a lot of that, in my mind, because of the way things have evolved, was in person. Like it didn't make sense like to do this 100% in a computer screen. But I've been pleasantly surprised. So it's not more work; it's just different, and I've really made peace with it. And I think we just happen to have a really good responsive class. And Galaxy is amazing. I just think we have a really good class, and a lot of that helps. I also happen to think, and I'm not just saying this because you two are here. I just really like UMass students. I don't know what the energy that brings us together. There's just something that there's a right combination of like taking things seriously and having a good time and like being good people and just like, I don't know, I just really like the vibe that we have here at UMass. So that really has helped me with the teaching aspect. With the laboratory research, it's different, and we have to like scheduling things, and people are wearing masks, and we're cleaning, and we have to do testing. But like, listen, at the end of the day, we're gonna get through this, and hopefully, all like the people, our loved ones, and the people in our community, like make it through okay. We're gonna get through this, and we're gonna be proud of this moment, and we're gonna say that was kind of weird, right? You know, and like we're gonna evolve, or we're gonna emerge to this on the other side. It's gonna be different again, but that's kind of like the way it is always. Everything is always changing. It's just we're just hyper aware of it right now. It's weird. It's weird, yes, but like eventually the testing, when the first time I went down to the Mullins Center, wow, that's weird. Someone is giving me a Q-tip to stick up my nose instead of selling me a hot dog. That is bizarre. But I don't want to trade that experience. I don't want to get hurt. There's a lot of people who got hurt and a lot of people are suffering. But like, what an interesting time we're living in.
Mm-hmm.
But to answer your question specifically, it provides some challenges, but here we are, you know?
Yeah. What about like even pre-COVID, like kind of what was your shift like from being like a student, and obviously you went and got a PhD as well, like after undergrad, like after that, like becoming a professor, what was kind of like the comparison to like student life versus like from balancing all your classes to like then becoming a professor and like kind of like being in a whole nother like workload type environment, and like having to like teach instead of like learn from the professor?
Right. Well, the good news was that I didn't have to take any more exams. I got to give them, right? It's a lot better to be on that side and don't have to worry about snot dripping down my face when I'm writing on a Scantron. But that is one aspect, one small aspect. And, you know, the goal is I loved college so much, I never wanted to leave it. And I was not a very strong high school student. I actually took 3 years off after high school. And I bring this up, and I don't know if I brought this up in class just yet, just to talk about non-traditional paths. So I used to go around, visit my friends in college, and I just had this vague sense that I'll make it there eventually. And I mean, ask mom and dad, they weren't super happy, enthusiastic what I was doing, but I just kind of had this sense like it's just going to work out. And very fortunate that I had the opportunity and the privilege to be able to do so. So I went to school and I eventually got there and I was like, you know, I like this learning thing. I'm good at it and I want to stay in it. And I never left. So I earned my PhD, came here. For me, I learned how to learn. And I also learned how to learn about the stuff I want to learn about and also do the things that I want to do. I want to be interviewed on podcasts. Look at this. Right? This is the kind of stuff I enjoy. I want to talk to students about stuff. You know, what is it that you guys are talking about that you see the world? What world do we want to do together? Right? I'm not educating the public of Massachusetts. We are creating the public of Massachusetts. That is a really big distinction in my mind. We're doing this together. And it's not me like from on high doing that. And so we're working as a team. What world we want to live in, not only in Commonwealth of Massachusetts, but New England, United States, and it's really the global community we're talking about too. So anyway, I'm pretty sure I didn't answer your question.
Wow.
Got really excited about talking about some other stuff, but
yeah. That was a great point. Yeah, and I think it's really nice to be able to like just have like talk with a professor other than like just hearing them talk in a lecture and stuff. Like I personally like I don't, and you've seen this too, like I don't have my camera on, I don't really participate much, but I really like hearing from professors and like hearing what they have to say, because I don't know, it's like that is what's gonna get people to be inspired and to do other things and like grow whatever this is, like this community, and then people will come off of this and do good things and all of that. So
yeah, something like we've been bringing up in this like our house is like we have a few STEM majors here, and so we have always discuss computer science. But with respect to that, it's kind of like, I mean, we are at like a research university primarily in a lot of aspects, and I mean, you know, the professors that we have teaching us certain subjects, it's like, you know, they are researching this as their career. Like they know, like, you know, there is a sort of like boundary of what is kind of accepted knowledge, and that's kind of what's taught to us. but then you have professors and, you know, people like yourself and people that, you know, teach at UMass Amherst and obviously other universities who like push those limits a little bit and then, you know, discover something, you know, make their discoveries, you know, or their you know, hypotheses, and they kind of then teach that to us. And it's like, it's super exciting to know that the people that are teaching us are at the forefront of a lot of these different subjects. And I mean, you know, like you said, like you're building, you know, the public of Massachusetts, and like, you know, it really is just generational, and you know, the next wave of people are going to come out and they're going to know what you're knowing and what you're teaching, and hopefully they kind of took it, you know, learned it and actually took that material, and you know, can then apply it and then just again push those boundaries that you guys are, you know, academics are currently pushing, which is super, super exciting to realize that college isn't just, you know, like regurgitating, you know, certain, you know, reading books and memorizing, you know, it's
getting a degree.
It's yeah, exactly. It's learning a type of way. And I think like, you know, like messages like this and like thoughts like this are important for students to realize. And like, you know, people like ourselves, you know, like, yeah, students, you know, we're students, we cut corners, we we try to make it out of college alive, you know. But I mean, you know, we're in here for a reason, and it's nice to kind of get out of the whole drone of some of the situations we're put in, and like, you know, talk to professors like yourself and others, and actually like dig deeper and learn something, you know. So it's incredible. But I don't even remember why we started talking about that. I don't even remember why I brought that up, but
I appreciate the reflection. That's great, and I think that I know we're on the same page. We have just different roles. I mean, we're all in this together. I know it's corny and it's just a bumper sticker thing to say, but like we really are. And so we just different roles of the same larger organism that is existence. And so we're getting through this, but not getting through this because, oh man, we have to get through this. We're getting through this with a smile on our faces because we have some really cool things that are going on in this moment and some great things going on in the future. And you're right, it's not only about like content or transfer of knowledge, it's also about, so what is that, you know, Joey organism? What's marching all about? And again, finding oneself is kind of a misnomer because there's nothing to find. You are what you are. We are what we are. And so how can I, as a professor, help support that so that we can move on together as a system, you know, as a larger entity, so we can all go home together, as it were, on a larger metaphysical level, which I'm not going to devolve into, but that is another.
I'd love to.
I think that's. We'll get you back here next week, though.
I feel like, yeah, it's almost that is like a deeper level of it that actually is like very true too. It's not just like professor to student. It's then like professor and the student, and then it's like you're just like organisms in the world that are just interacting and like creating like a better experience and like overall for the world and stuff.
That's it. So, you know, like don't get hung up about like missing this or that, and do your best or do whatever it is that you know that you want to be doing, and that's kind and all that stuff, and we're all together. Anyway, you said way better than I just did just now.
Who, me?
Yes, Joey, the Joey.
The Joey Donovan.
No, so I kind of want to like, I've been thinking about that stuff you said about just the microbiome, like being kind of more like abundant than your own cells in your body. And it made me think how like, do you think this system is like kind of controlling how like people act? Not in like a way of like, oh, it's like controlling us and we're not ourselves, our microbiome is ourselves. It's like, I'm thinking that this thing is like of a greater importance than like we know it to be. And it's like, is this kind of like directing our actions as like a collective, like in like the world, sort of like we obviously have conscious, like a conscious mind, and we can like make our own actions and stuff like that. But Like, do you think this thing is kind of has like a lot of control over what we do?
Right. You are wading into very philosophical territories, which I love to discuss. And the question I would normally ask would be like, why is it important for us to define where the control lies versus it is what it is? To answer scientifically, microbes in our gut make neurotransmitters that impact our mood, our anxiety, our sleep. And so, from a chemical standpoint, from um, a standpoint that we can measure, yeah, we can see hallmarks or different signals of that occurring too. But then when we get into the bigger picture, is what is control? How much do we think we have control? And since control itself is a human concept, does it actually exist? Does it need to exist? And do we need to define where the control lies? And then we start talking about intergenerational aspects too of things that are passed down to you, either genetically, epigenetically, historically, culturally, about things you just can't do anything about. Just, the A, B, C, D, F system. That's something that was here before you, right? That's something you can't control. So I'm not trying to deflect your question, but the way I look at the entire system is that I can't tell what the microbes are controlling, what I'm controlling, what you're controlling, because we're all feeding into each other. Like if you smile, you're going to tend to make me smile, right? So does that mean you control my affect, right? So you're smiling right now, and that's making me some neurotransmitter is being released. So are you trying to control me right now? But at the end of the day, this is all just around and around and around and around.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't necessarily matter that much, aside from it's a cool thing to talk about.
Yeah, I know there isn't
answer.
like a precise answer to that, but I guess it's like, yeah, it is cool to like kind of like think about, and I'll definitely be thinking about it after this a lot because I think, I don't know, that's just a crazy thought. That like, I don't know, that your microbiome, like how important it is like to how like you just live life. And like, do you think it's passed down like genetically? Like do you have like a really similar microbiome to like your family and all of that? Like, just you mentioned me and Martin probably share like some microbes and stuff just from living together, but do you think like you've lived with your family ever since you like left the house? Like, do you think you have like very similar like makeup as like your brother, like you're a sister or whatever, and like that's through genetics and through like always being together, and that's how like you kind of act similar? Or is that kind of not how it works?
There has been twin studies on this very topic. So like you take twins and they live in separate places, how similar are their microbiomes? Well, as it turns out, the way you live has a bigger determinant of like what is inside of you. So if you're separate twins, your genetics play a role. You're identical twins, and so that plays a role with it too. But like who you live with, if you have a dog, dogs tend to transfer their microbes to your microbiome much more readily than cats for some reason, or at least that was early research. I'm not sure if there's been an updated understanding of that as well. But there is a genetic component about passed down to your family, but how much that actually, like what percentage, I don't think science has a number, because what ends up happening is that you and I have different microbes and you and Martin have different microbes. But what ends up doing, if we're generally healthy, they're doing about the same thing. So it's a scientific concept as functional redundancy. So we have redundant systems within us, but they're different actors. But they're doing the same thing. Just like a forest in California and a forest in New England might have the same, have different trees and different birds and different animals, whatever it may be, but they're doing about the same thing in that ecosystem also. So there's two different levels of looking at that.
Wow, that was an interesting analogy. That was yep. Well,
I do this for a living. I do this for a living. I've used that before.
You're good at making things like simple to understand, and I guess that is like a
good
big
professor.
part. Being a professor. Yeah. I guess I don't know if you want to talk about like climate change or whatever, like sustainable foods and like how it like affects like climate change, or I don't know if you want to like go on into that, but I was kind of like curious about, and especially like that milk article that we read about like how China's like uh involvement in like milk and like kind of the impacts it has like on the environment and stuff like that. Like, you kind of want to I don't know, I guess talk about just like effects of like food on like the climate.
Right. So the choices, and thank you for that question. And of course, we're not going to be able to unpack the entirety of the system. But I think that intentionality and being able to make selections in a direction of the world in which you want to live in is important, especially if we happen to be living a world of choices. So it goes back to our points of like what's going on in this modern world. Is our role to like accumulate as much stuff as possible, to like experience everything all at once and have just we have amazing abundances. Do we need to experience it all at once, right? And do we need to consume? And what is the role of responsible consumption? Do we go in the opposite direction and we say, oh no, we can't? And so those are two extremes. So you could have maybe like a very hedonistic extreme where you have I'm just gonna go whatever feels good. I don't care about tomorrow. Let's just do this thing right now. And then the other extreme is I'm gonna sit on the floor and like make my own clothes and like not purchase anything or do anything. And I would, me personally, say let's put those extremes to the side and focus on more of a middle direction too. And that happens to be the way that I view the world also, which doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't be focused on sustainability or anything like that. I just have faith that as a collective, we're going to get there. There's enough people talking about it, which does not absolve me of personal responsibility. I just see us moving there together to reach that equilibrium. And when things swing a little too far, it gets really uncomfortable, like massive consumption with no regards to the environment. We're feeling the effects of that. So like when you have what we believe to be extreme weather patterns as a result, that's a big sign. And by the way, I don't know if this is your perspective or not. I'm not worried about ruining the planet. The planet's going to be just fine. It's really a species, like that's really what we're talking about. And so I think people kind of conflate the two. It's about ruining the planet. The planet will move on and evolve, and we will be a blip in the history of the planet, and it will move on and do its thing. But let's have this experience right now with intention. Anyway, that's not talking about food specifically, but it's talking about the big picture too. So it has to be a balance about I want to work towards a better tomorrow. I also have faith that other people are also working towards a better tomorrow. What I'm doing to work towards a better tomorrow is I study breast milk, I study plant-based nutrition. I follow more of a plant-based diet for sustainability reasons. I do all these things too. And there's going to be other people who are going to be protesting, and there's going to be other people who are going to be working organic farms. I can't do it all. I also can't freak out if I happen to order food from a restaurant that happens to be on a naughty list. Whoever's like making up the naughty list, like I just can't keep up with that. Even though I've gone through periods of my life where it's just like, oh, I can't buy from that company. And of course, there's certain companies where you don't want to necessarily support their positions. But are you too familiar with Alan Watts? Have you ever heard Alan Watts?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So you might be familiar with this story. He would talk about Robert Oppenheimer, who's a physicist who is in charge of, or one of the people in charge of making the nuclear bomb.
Manhattan Project.
Manhattan Project. That's exactly it. And so Robert Oppenheimer said, it's perfectly clear that the world is going to hell. And the only thing we can do to save it from going to hell is not doing anything about it. Because if us taking a look at the climate, I know this sounds counterintuitive, but we're looking at the climate, oh my God, the world is going to hell. Let's all do something and start yelling at each other and do it, like nothing's gonna get done. We're just gonna be in gridlock. But like we have to mindfully take a step back, pause, and respond to what we can do in our situation too, versus saying, oh, this stuff is all bad. I'm gonna blame you, I'm gonna blame you, I'm gonna blame you, I'm gonna blame you too. We need to work together as a unit. And that means even people who disagree with me, I happen to have a certain point of view of this world. and there's people who don't share it, that's cool. I just want to be in the same room with you and not necessarily even talk about politics. I just want to be your brother, and you could be my sister. That's all.
Yeah. And like the conflict isn't going to help anything pretty much. Like having I guess like having like differing opinions will like somehow like bring some other ideas to the table that will like help like move on. But I guess like having like the locked in opinions and then just bashing against each other like won't really like help anything like improve.
It's like always finding a compromise is what's gonna make like real progress. And this goes, I feel like, with a lot of things. I mean, like, if Joey and I, for example, were arguing, like you mentioned, like reaching a gridlock, and we were just set on what we wanted to, nothing would get done, and came up with a compromise, and it's like, boom, there, problem solved, But yeah, what do you think about like like actually having conversations, like physical conversations, like we discussed briefly climate change and stuff. Do you think that the way to, and this is obviously like a loaded question, there's no correct answer, but like, do you think that the way to get certain things underway or like done is to just start talking about it? And do you think that there is like some sort of like compounding of like conversation almost that occurs that kind of spurs these changes, like socially?
I do. I think that our species happens, we can't keep quiet. We like to share things. We like to talk. And I think that for us, it's not culturally accepted to like bring up a certain topic, that's not helpful. So if we want to see a change, we talk about that change. So when I first started in our department, I felt it would not be a great time to talk about cannabinoid research. I was fairly new. I didn't want to talk about cannabis. And then all of a sudden, the laws changed in Massachusetts. It became acceptable to talk about it. And at that point in time, I was like, I'm going to talk about it every single moment I can to get my colleagues on board with it. And guess what? They're on board with it. And maybe I could have done it a year or two earlier. So it's those sort of things that I think that we shouldn't really hold back on, when we're talking about in context of making the world a better place. Now, we're going to have different perspectives too, because at the end of the day, there has been no war started that wasn't with the intent of making somebody better. So, right, so like we have that too. But if we're able to non-judgmentally share things and be like, all right, my goal is not to try and change your perspective, but it's to share my perspective. That's the goal. And like compromise is amazing, but sometimes it's just like, I hear you. I don't know if there's a middle ground with this, no one can argue religions, right? You can't reach a middle ground in religions, right? Like, so like, and people with politics are treating it as like sports teams or religions, right? Yeah. And so like that, I have absolute perspectives, but like, that's not true. It's just a perspective.
Yeah. And that's something that's like, increasingly just like, not even like that people are doing it on purpose per se, but and social media definitely doesn't help this. Just talking to somebody of different perspectives, just being able to talk to somebody about those perspectives on like a neutral ground is getting more and more difficult, and it's unfortunate. Maybe it's not getting more difficult. I mean, obviously, like we're having conversations right now. Our house is having conversations. The people that we're friends with, we all talk, but being able to, I think, like find somebody you really don't agree with and talk to them is like, I feel like it used to be, not shunned to do that. And now it's kind of just weird, on just every topic in general. And I think it's like people are just like more stubborn, in a way, and
you have to have like, you like almost have to have like a good grasp on like how someone like thinks before you start saying things that are like somewhat like hot takes or like hot, like kind of like controversial issues, because otherwise like I think people just fear like kind of an unpleasant like interaction happening with like just arguments and like aggression and like whatever, like, but I don't know. I don't know what
And,
way there would be
I
to
mean,
fix that, but
and like cannabis, for example, like you said, you wanted to research that. Is like a good example of that. I feel um, like myself not being somebody who particularly, uses cannabis or is into smoking. I mean, I feel like there's a period of time, just a few years back where it was almost like awkward, and I guess it still is because we're still in a weird transitional period, but it's always like, it was awkward like discussing it with certain people, and it's like why is this the case, and awkward, maybe, it's not a bad thing, but not being able to talk about it because of what it is just deemed to be socially is like just a weird concept. And it's like, why shouldn't we discuss these things? Why can't we discuss these things? And I think, that definitely goes hand in hand with like a lot of different topics today. And it's hopefully we'll, like you said, I mean, a few years from now, we'll it's going to be a lot different. And I mean, who knows where things are going to be then. But
I had a question, not really on this subject, but
switch it up.
so for your cannabinoid research, uh, do you know the answer why when like after someone smokes weed or cannabis, why do they crave food? Like, what is the science behind that? Do you have any idea?
Right. That's a good question. So that's not my official capacity with cannabis research. That might be my unofficial experience with cannabis, because I happen to be a user and a big fan myself, and that's something I talk about. I might talk about that in class too, just because it just we talk about alcohol,
Yeah,
so
why
why
not?
not talk about that? We talk about bread, why not talk about that? It is different though. It is an intoxicant, so there is difference, and there is a legal aspect to it as well. In terms of why certain, is the question why certain strains make you more hungry, or just like
Just in
marijuana in general? You know, the actual physiological pathway that influences either your limbic system or your neural system, I don't know if that's known. And so currently, right now, we're doing a review of what is known about cannabinoids, just in general, how they interact with our body receptors. So our cells have these locks on them, and then cannabinoids could be the locks, or the keys rather, to those locks. And so the way those signals occur and like where it occurs and like the downstream influence has not been really researched very well because of social norms, right? Because marijuana bad, legal ramifications, and still a challenge too. So UMass allows hemp research only in certain instances. So it's very, very low in delta 9 THC, so the active cannabinoid that you experience the high. You can't do that kind of research right now. So it's very, very much at the early stages. But things like CBD, I don't know if you're familiar with CBD, that concept. Those things are going to be coming more online as well. So when I'm saying we're doing cannabinoid research, we're at like early stages. And science in general doesn't know too much about why one is hungry. I was just hearing about certain strains of cannabis that actually suppress appetites,
Mm,
which is, have you heard about that?
I mean, I think something that I've heard along those lines is like sativas would do that. But I mean, I'm no scientist.
I feel like a lot of stuff you hear is like stoner sciences.
Exactly, yeah.
Right. And I'm trying to add science to that, and because a lot of my science is stoner science too. Just like I got some stuff to do today. I'm going to use sativas, right? Or I'm just going to chill out and I don't know, watch something stupid on the tube.
Yeah.
Got an indica. So like what is the science behind that? What is the actual behavioral and the physiological stuff? But as I said earlier on in our conversation, maybe some things should not be left overly described, because there is something I don't want to say romantic, but there's this nice thing about being able to say like, I really like this strain, and this is the effect that I get. even though the scientists tell me that I shouldn't be feeling like this.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, do your thing and let go of expectations. But that does not answer your question. I don't know why. I don't think science is that's why you get the munchies.
Yeah.
But
That's why they need more stoner science, because to supplement the lack of research that is like this time period, I guess. But
totally. I should work on that though. If I'm going to be interviewed by people interested on this topic, people are going to ask that question, right? So that's like a good one to. I should have like a better answer in my back pocket.
So you brought up like CBD research and stuff. I mean, like that's all new, like legally and just scientifically speaking. I mean, research wise, but why do you think that without a lot of like concrete research that a lot of like CBD products are being pushed, like oils and like ointments for like very like serious things like cancers and stuff? I mean, because there's like is the research limited and companies are like using it to their advantage, like CBD and cannabis, to kind of like sell a product that may or may not work? Or is there something substantial behind it that's kind of like actually pushing these products forward and making them useful for whatever they're used for?
So there is some scientific evidence. There is also a lot of anecdotal evidence. And not that I don't think CBD is placebo effect, but the placebo effect is real. And a placebo effect is so let's pretend it's placebo. Who cares? That's great. Something that like alleviates any sort of suffering by one's thought processes. And we talked about meditation before. Our minds are really powerful and we can do a lot of stuff as evident by the placebo effect. But anyway, back to CBD. Science is about the measurable, things that we can measure with a ruler or with a fancy instrument, and we just haven't applied the ruler yet to it. That does not mean that it hasn't been there, right? Like, so I can drive my car to the next state, but not knowing how many miles there are between here and the next state. It's just a thing, like I know that I can do it, but like I just didn't take the time to measure it just yet. And so that's what CBD is what we're doing with that.
That's interesting. That was
another one.
Professor Sela and his analogies.
Yeah, that's super cool, and like obviously I think like the media has done a great job, honestly, like kind of publicizing, like, because I feel like the word, like, I guess the acronym like CBD is like a lot of people know it, like, which is like a good thing, I think. And like it seems that it has like good press as well, that it's like maybe it's like there's a lot of fake stuff and whatever, but it seems like it has like they almost like depict it as like a miracle drug, sort of. Like I feel like a lot of people do, but like I feel like in order to be like described as that, there has to be some like sort of like good things that it brings to people. So I don't know. I think that's like a part of it, is like getting like the public to accept it more.
How much? Let me ask this of you two. How much do you think this? I think there is optimism. I'm hearing from both of you, like, oh, well, we hope this thing works, or we hope that this helps people. Of course, why would you be rooting against this? But there's also be like, well, is this really the way it is? And so there's a little bit of skepticism. Where do you think the skepticism comes from, aside from lack of complete scientific evidence? Because there's some scientific evidence.
I would say, I mean, obviously this isn't like a new thing per se. I mean, this is like, before us, like the whole movement, is 60s, 70s, I feel like, is definitely when I would say like the skepticism must have started. And today, I think it's probably just word of mouth based on just, like, I mean, if I was exposed to somebody who, for example, was like smoked weed, but also like in my mind was like not a good person, I'd be like, oh, wow. So it's, I'm not, that's terrible, like weed bad, but and I think that might be like kind of where it comes from, like on a personal level. But also just, I mean, how it's portrayed in the media. I mean, Yeah, I don't even. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not so sure.
I'd say I'm just a skeptic about like a lot of things until
Yeah.
I like either get the like hear it in something that makes sense to me, like that I can like kind of understand and like accept, or if I like try it myself and it really works. But
Yeah.
I'd say I've tried it before and I think it like it helps like for what it says that it does, but I also don't have fortunately don't have like some of the things that it claims to have like help like cancer, like insomnia, or like I don't even know what else, like shows you how much I know about it,
Yeah.
but
I know that.
I don't know.
I know that for myself. I mean, I used to smoke. Stopped, but and I personally didn't enjoy it. I was like, okay, this isn't something that's for me. But I understood that some people do enjoy it, just like I enjoy drinking alcohol, for example, on a weekend. But so back home, where Worcester, Massachusetts, um, there was a dispensary nearby, and my mom was having like incredible back pain and trouble sleeping and all this. And I was like, okay, she's never, she's tried, weed before, whatever it was that her, whatever. And you know, my mom quit smoking cigarettes, after college, but I thought to myself, like, okay, like, let's see if this is something she'd be open to, kind of like seeing, and if it works, because I've never used marijuana like to alleviate any like physical pain or anything. It's just not, I guess, where I am in life. But I thought I would give it a try and looked through the dispensary's kind of catalog, found something that was supposed to like, it must have been an indica and you know, promotes sleep, pains and all that. I gave a pre-roll to my mom and I said like, hey, like have this at your own pace. Like,
Yeah,
I read that this may help you. I'm not sure. And she said, thank you. And she got back to me and said like, hey, like, honestly, not really, like, and it wasn't for her. And I was like, well, now we know, now it's something that's kind of like, you know, we tried it out. We did our, our due diligence in looking up like what, effects it's supposed to have. And I think, it's, for everyone's sake, I mean, it's good to be like skeptical about these things, but also like, I mean, open to it. And if, it's not going to harm you, in most ways. But yeah, I think being a skeptic is definitely important, especially if you're not doing your own due diligence I mean, I think that's the most important part is looking into it yourself and not just taking like word of mouth, because you never know what you're getting into. I feel like it's important to get to know what you're getting into. Um, yeah. So it was nice to kind of see that my mom, like somebody who's coming from a Polish Catholic, kind of perspective is likewise open minded and we realized together like it's not for her, it's not doing what it said it's supposed to do, but it's interesting to see how much of that is true or if it's person to person or whatnot.
that's right. And what I'm hearing from both of you, and I'm going to like combine both your answers. And thank you so much for sharing the story about your mom's experience. I've heard that a very similar story about other people as well. Is that we have cultural reasons why to be skeptical, as well as, well, what's the scientific evidence, right? So, we're STEM majors and like we're trained to, and we think about things because we want to learn about the natural world by things we can measure. So those are real things and real, I want to say barriers, just the way things are, the way things are evolving. So culturally, we're seeing a shift, of course. I think the next generation is not going to really be thinking about too much of these transition hangups it may be. And people are like, well, what's the science behind it? And how am I going to respond to it? We have access to all, any kind of like beer, wine, or whatever. Not everyone drinks beer or wine. It doesn't really work for them. And that's what we try to say is like, if it doesn't work for you, don't do that. We're interested in the science because I have met a lot of people who either respond or don't respond. And I think, Martin, you really hit the nail on the head. Like, why do some people like vibe with it and why do some people not? And in what instances? And Joey, don't worry about like the whole list of things that CBD is supposed to treat. Like for me, I look at that, I'm a little skeptical because it's like 30 different like things. Be like, are you sure like that's the case? And so for me, I want to be working with people who want to know the answers also. So they want to count like what kind of cannabinoids are in their products or whatever, and then be able to deliver on those promises that are being made versus just like, here's the good stuff, take the good stuff and feel good about the good stuff, right? So it's a really interesting point in time too. It's just something different to do. And I don't know many breast milk / cannabinoid scientists out there. So I'm going to take that niche. That's going to be my claim.
Yeah, that's very unique.
It's pretty niche, right? That's pretty good.
But yeah, I don't know any. I feel like I've never met anyone either that has studied breast milk in general too. So that's like, and I haven't really thought of, yeah, besides you, and I haven't really thought of it much, like the importance of it. But I don't know. This kind of opened my eyes about that. And I guess I was wondering, like, I guess combining the two things, is so if like a mother that's carrying a baby like smokes, you're probably not supposed to smoke marijuana with the baby, right? But what about like afterwards? Would it like have some sort of, because I know that like that marijuana somehow, or whether it's like the chemical makeup of it like gets into like fats, something like, is there any way that it like sort of goes into like the breast milk?
Yes.
What would be like the effect on the baby?
I think in general, I think it's a good policy that you don't want to introduce new things to that system. Just and the recommendation right now is not like moms should all be smoking marijuana. That's not the way things are right now, and I don't know if that's going to be the way they are in the future. But if people are using it for medical reasons or using CBD, not necessarily to get high or to have that psychoactive effect, how safe is that? And is that something that the regulatory agencies should be able to say? So the FDA would be like, no, don't do this. Right now, the FDA is saying, no, don't do this because that's like the baseline, right? But there's some people who use CBD to sleep well and to treat anxiety. A lot of people with post-traumatic stress disorder use CBD as well. And so what kind of recommendations can you give to those individuals based on science? And yes, you can secrete cannabinoids, and there's more than just THC and more than just CBD in breast milk too. You're right, they're fat soluble and they do wind up there. But to what extent, we're still trying to understand. I was running a conference last year or 2 years ago, and we had a great team organizing the conference, and we had some great speakers. I made sure to invite the one woman I knew who was working on this topic from UC San Diego, and she gave a great talk on this. And so she had all these samples, these specimens from moms, and she used fancy analytical techniques to determine how much cannabinoids are actually in the breast milk. And you can find them, but whether or not they do anything to the baby, we don't know. Whether or not they're a good idea or a bad idea, if I can put a label on it, a better label, of course, would be helpful for whatever the baby, development, consistent with development. We don't know. It's hard to do those studies though, right? Because you're not going to be like, all right, here's 100 moms, and you guys are just going to get high all day. 100 moms that you folks are just going to be doing yoga all day. So it's not that's not a thing.
Yeah.
But we'll see. We'll see exactly. That's exactly. I like where your mind's headed with that. We have expertise in breast milk, microbiome research, plant-based nutrition, and now we're starting to bring in expertise in cannabinoid research. And we want to see exactly what the nexus is, because why not? That's kind of where like the cross-disciplinary approaches are, and we can do that with one group too, because it's not just me. I talk about science as if it's like me, professor. I have a team of folks working in a laboratory too. So there's experts in all kinds of different areas. And I not only teach them, they teach me stuff. Just like you guys teach me things, not only like when I ask you a question, you teach me stuff, but when I see exactly what resonates, and then like, even like, I was going to say hallway conversations or just in the campus center, like what you guys are talking about, like that's what's important right now. Even if it's popular culture, that's information. That's really important. And I'm a big believer, and I know this is morphing into something we weren't talking about. In January, there was this bizarre human thing that we're about to enter a war with Iran. Do you remember? Do you remember that? Like there was a conflict with Iran, not conflict with Iran. There was an assassination. There was a military something or other happened.
Oh,
The details don't matter.
yeah. I do recall. I don't know the time period, but yeah, I do recall something of the sorts. Yeah.
This was pre-COVID. It's not that important. The fact that you guys can't recall it is amazing. And at the time I looked at it, people were making memes about that right away. Oh, here comes World War III, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember those memes. Like we had, because January, February, March, like that was like heavy what was going on. Also, now we're post-COVID and that's dominating everything. And I am a firm believer that we didn't take that stuff seriously. And look at us, we didn't get into another, and this is me putting value judgment, I'm a pacifist, so another dumb war that we didn't need to do. And I think that's in part because of our current generation, your generation, you're making memes about the stuff that previous generations be like, oh my God, you're gonna have to go invade them and kick their ass. And you know, you're passing, you know, just jokes about World War III starting, and it diffused the situation, and no one freaking out. And I'm not saying not to take things seriously, like cancer or intolerance or things that are really big issues. But there's things where we don't have to put all our weights in, and that was an amazing thing that I think that we'll look back on. And people smarter than me on these topics and social media and communications and sociology, they may have a big disagreement with me the way I look at it, but I was just like, wow, this is really cool that we're able to laugh about it versus here we go again, another war in another place for like who knows what.
Mm-hmm. True. That's interesting. Yeah.
Could be because of like I feel like there's a ton of information just flowing like everywhere now. And it's like the next thing is the most like talked about, and it's like you may talk about something and it could be important now, but then like there could be and obviously the COVID like pandemic was and is just like a huge topic, and like it should be like talked about and everything, but that like kind of washes away like a bunch of other stuff that's like comes up, and like that's probably why a lot of people haven't like heard about like other events that have happened and stuff, just because like there's a huge amount of like information that's like on people's timelines and stuff, and just I don't know, it's kind of like a search for the next like most important thing. Mm-hmm. Maybe not important, but just the next like talked about thing.
Yeah, and I think that there's something to be said for that too, and maybe that mirrors the contours of our human minds more than holding on to something for much longer and having that need to hold on to stuff versus us, you know, our thoughts come and go. Mm-hmm. You know, things viral packets of information gets passed around literally as memes. That's an anthropological term around our society. Mm-hmm. And thoughts come and go like clouds in the sky. They're not there. None of them are permanent. So be it. And so the fact that you may not know the details about some Iranian general that was assassinated over something or other he did 10 years, 20 years, whatever it was, I don't even know the details.
Yeah.
That's great. Why do we want to hold on to that thought? Why is that going to be our defining humanity that we want to focus on versus I much rather laugh at like a stupid, you know, I saw a dumb meme about like toe Titanic or Totanic. I can't even say it. Like on she had Steve today. And I was like, this is the best thing ever versus like talking about, you know, weighty issues, quote unquote, weighty issues of the time. Even though we do have weighty issues that we have to pour our attention and intention to. Healthcare, sustainability, climate change, you know, these things that we kind of put to the side, let's focus on those. And we get it.
Well put.
Well, Professor Sela, definitely somebody who uses, a headspace guy, or
I have it, yeah.
No, it's very mindful. Yeah, I love it. It's a pleasure. But I think we're actually gonna wrap up because I know I'm heading out to New Hampshire, so 3 hours. You got a 3-hour drive ahead of me. But I guess to finish this off, because we did meet at Northampton Brewery briefly, which was funny because I think the reason why we went there was because it was brought up in class, and then next thing we know, we see you there.
Great place, great
but
recommendation.
Yeah, we want to recommend, or I want to recommend this place called the Worst House in Northampton. Have you heard of it?
I have, yes. What's your experience? I'm curious.
Oh, we've gone there, I think 2 or 3 times now, and it's like an awesome German like themed or I don't know, it's just German bar.
Got pretzels, they got bratwurst,
Yeah.
they got
food's limited, but you know the traditional German bar food is fantastic. They have sweet and sour meatballs that are great. What was it?
Pretzels. They were out of it when I was there, unfortunately.
And then they have nice 32-ounce beers, so you can get. But yeah, the atmosphere is great. Honestly, it's not too large, so there's only like so many people, and it's like a nice like homey feeling to it. It's great. But something else that one of my housemates, Pat, who's also in your class, wanted me to ask you were recommendations for East Hampton.
Right.
And that you I think he was in class, you said that East Hampton was like the place to go, and he was like, all right, you need to ask him where are we going.
I guess it depends on the vibe. Is it going to be like a bunch of dudes going out, or is he going to, I don't know.
Bring a date.
No, it's not a date. No, it's not a date. It's for it's the.
It's not a cute date, is it?
No, it's a housemates. It's just a friends.
Well, so there is Kasara is a Japanese restaurant that has ramen. It's great. It's on Cottage Street. There's daily operation. They actually have a dish there called Stoner Slaw. It's kind of like a funky Asian, I don't want to say fusion, but Asian influenced thing going on. Really strong, bold flavors. That's on Cottage Street as well. There's Coco in the Cellar Bar, which is more of a special night, but still you can go there. And they have great fried chicken there, just unbelievable. But like elevated, just just a bit, not like yeah. That's
KFC.
Yeah, I didn't want to call out any companies, fellas. You did Mickey D's twice. We're
not hating on Mickey D. We literally went there like
McDonald's.
We went there on like a Wednesday at like 1 a.m.
We had a weird period of time. We were just fiending fast food every other day. It was bad, but it had to be done.
It's a fun time.
It had to be done.
Do your thing. I think if you do it breakfast, lunch, and dinner, it's gonna be different. There's a place. Let me think. What else in East Hampton? They had a really good cocktail bar that didn't have food. It was called Gigantic, which is tongue-in-cheek because it's a really small place. And they had really good cocktails. A couple of good friends were working there as bartenders. And if cocktails happen to be your thing, and as you move on from the hallowed halls of University of Massachusetts, maybe you'll make some more money and you can not have to think about buying the $12 cocktail.
Cross my fingers.
Yeah. You guys will be just fine. I'm telling you, 60,000 subscribers. You can monetize this.
Oh, yeah.
My mom would watch this.
That's the pipe stream.
What is that? What does the figure 60,000 come from?
Just made up.
The future. It's the future.
just made up.
Yeah. Hopefully, we'll be with Spotify soon enough.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'll get back to you in a few years, Professor Sela. You just watch.
No, I mean if you hit 60K, 100K, I'll be getting back to you. I'll be hitting you up with stuff. Don't worry.
Well, it was a real pleasure talking to you. Honestly, I expected it to be about this long. I mean, it was like almost 2 hours now, but
is it? Oh,
I think so. We're getting there,
wow.
But
thank you so much for your time.
That was incredible. We learned a lot. Thank you so much.
We'll be in class.
Yes, my pleasure. It was a lot of fun. Good luck, whatever you're going to do with this. Hopefully, it ends up being good. I'm curious. Do you have a second speaker? That's
I've had other professors agree, but because of COVID and I guess just being lazy, I never got to it. And they were also kind of waiting for me to have an inaugural episode. So I'm glad that I have one of you now that I can show other professors and be like, hey, like we've done it and it went fine. So
I got this clown.
We're gonna get this guy out.
Yeah. Awesome. This is great. Well, have a good trip. Thanks for the recommendation, Worst House, and I'll see you guys later. I'll see you Tuesday. How about that?
Sounds
All
good.
right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Good weekend.